found was the dinosaur figurines. Several hundred of them would come to light. These figurines show many dinosaur species, including the duck-billed Trachodon, Gorgosaurus, Titanosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, um, Plesiosaurs, Leviathan, Iguanodon, Brachiosaurs, Pterodons, Tyrannosaurus rex, and other unknown dinosaur species. Some of the clay figures also had representations of humans and dinosaurs interacting. Like the Ica stones, it showed people being eaten by the dinosaurs. Also, many statues of animals extinct to this part of the world were found. Ancient horses, camels, rhinoceroses, and giant monkeys. Each of the clay pieces was unique, and it had been individually made without molds and was hand sculpted. In 1947, Jules Rod published a book about his findings. A few newspapers and magazines had wrote articles about his collection, but no authorities or scientists would investigate what he found. In 1950, Jules Rod would be visited by two American newspapermen, Lowell Harmer and William W. Russell. Both would take photographs of Jules Rod excavating more dinosaur figurines. In 1952, Charles C. DePeso of the Amerind Foundation investigated the Jules Rod collection. After examining the artifacts of over 32,000 pieces, for only 4 hours, he declared that the lines on the figurines were too sharp and too nude to be ancient, and that the collection was made by a family living in the Acambaro area during the winters. Despeso based the claim on second-hand information. DePeso stated that his examination was very precise and thorough, yet he would have had to inspect 133 clay figurines a minute to see all of the 32,000 pieces, which he claimed that he did. It would be one of several examples of the scientific community trying to claim that the Jules Rod collection was an elaborate hoax, even though the evidence says otherwise. In 1954, the official archaeologist of Mexico inspected the collection. Dr. Eduardo Noguera was the lead investigator. After visiting Jules Rod, they went to El Toro Hill and started digging at selected sites. They also would find figurines that showed signs of antiquity, similar to the ones Jules Rod found. The archaeologist congratulated Jules Rod for his remarkable discoveries, and two of the archaeologists promised to write about the discovery in a scientific journal. 3 weeks later, when Dr. Noguera would release his report, the archaeologists claimed that the artifacts were a hoax because they contained dinosaurs which had been extinct for millions of years. The scientists involved decided scientific orthodoxy was more important than admitting the truth. Jules Rod's collection would come to the attention of Charles Hapgood, a professor of history and anthropology at Keene State College in New Hampshire. In 1955, he spent several months investigating Jules Rod's artifacts. Hapgood came to Acambrio as a skeptic. By the time he would leave, he would be a firm believer in these objects' authenticity. Hapgood started excavating a number of sites around Acambaro, where the ground was previously undisturbed. He, like others, also found ceramic pieces and figurines similar to what Jules Rod had uncovered. Hapgood wanted to eliminate the possibility of forgeries planted for him to find, so he found a house that had been built 25 years before Jules Rod had come to Mexico. The house was situated in an area he felt was likely to contain artifacts. The house was owned by Acambaro's chief of police. Hapgood was given permission to dig under the concrete floor of the living room. A 6-foot hole was dug, and it uncovered 43 more Jules Rod type artifacts. Hapgood would return to Acambrio in 1968 with Earl Stanley Gardner, the creator of the Perry Mason TV character. Mr. Gardner was an investigator of archaeological problems as well as a criminologist. Mr. Gardner would determine that the Jules Rod collection was not a hoax. Hapgood would also have samples radiocarbon dated. The testing showed that the object's origin ranged from 4500 BC to 1100 BC. Also, samples were subjected to thermolucent testing at the University of Pennsylvania, which came up with dates of approximately 2500 BC. The university withdrew its conclusions when it found out that some of the samples were from dinosaur figurines. The Jules Rod collection would consistently radiocarbon date to between 4000 to 1500 BC, as two tests in the 1990s would confirm. Hapgood would record his account of his 18-year investigation in a privately published book entitled Mystery in Acambaro. Upon the passing away of Jules Rod, his collection would become the property of the Acambaro Museum. In 1999, Drs. Dennis Swift and Dr. Don Patton would travel to Acambaro to investigate the dinosaur figures. They would soon learn that the Jules Rod collection was locked up in storage and not on public display. After several days of negotiations with the mayor and the Secretary of Tourism, the director of Acambaro Museum, permission was given to view a portion of the collection. They were given the conference room next to the mayor's office to view the artifacts. Two policemen with AK-47s and pistols stood guard while Dr. Swift unpacked the figurines and Dr. Patton photographed them. Dr. Swift and Patton would also learn of more Jules Rod type artifacts that had been uncovered in the late 70s. The doctors met Ernesto Narvet Marinas. He was commander of the Mexican Federal Police for the Calaya zone of the Guanajuato province, which included the town of Acambaro. Marinas got a tip that illegal excavations were being conducted on Goat Mountain and that the artifacts found were being traded for black market weapons. Mr. Marinas' investigation concluded that the artifacts being dug up were taken to the U.S. border near Laredo, Texas, and being traded for guns. When Ernesto Marinas apprehended the culprits, they had 3,300 Jules Rod type figurines in their possession. Marinas cataloged the figures as evidence, and he personally saw 9 figurines that depicted dinosaurs. The figurines were handed over to the mayor of Acambaro, and who at the time was Dr. Luis Moto, and the collection was kept at City Hall. The smugglers Jaime Aguirre and Raul Hernandez were sentenced to federal prison in Mexico City for trading in genuine archaeological artifacts. The Jules Rod collection, as well as the other similar objects that have been excavated from and around the town of Acambaro, Mexico, give us evidence of an ancient culture that once lived in a heavily forested area. Acambaro today is a dry valley. This valley was once filled by a large lake thousands of years ago. The areas where the Jules Rod artifacts were found was at one time the beach of that lake. The objects were left buried in the sand thousands of years ago and remained undisturbed until Jules Rod found them in the summer of 1944. In 1911, miners discovered and began removing guano deposits from a cave 22 miles to the southwest of Lovelock, Nevada. When guano, which is bat dung, breaks down, it becomes a valuable source for saltpeter, which is an ingredient in gunpowder. When the miners had removed several layers of guano, they started finding Indian relics. Lovelock Cave, as it's known today, has a U-shaped interior and is 40 feet deep and 60 feet wide. Originally it was known as Horseshoe Cave for this reason. The bat guano had filled the cave with nearly a 6-foot layer of the substance. The artifacts found beneath the guano would be thousands of years old. 4 feet down, the miners found 2 mummies lying on a layer of burnt material surrounded by many broken arrows. The mummified bodies measured between 6.5 to 8 feet tall and had red hair. The Paiute Indians have recounted stories of red-haired giants that were as tall as 12 feet. They encountered these giants when they first settled the area. The Seetica, as they called them, were vicious cannibals that would eat any Paiutes they would capture. The name Seetica means tule eaters. Tule is a fibrous water plant that the giants wove into rafts. They would use these rafts to escape Paiute attacks. The Paiutes state that after many years of warfare, they banded together with the surrounding Indian tribes to rid themselves of these giants. The last encounters they had with the Seetica was when the coalition of Indians chased the last known giants to a cave. When the giants refused to come out to fight, the Indians filled the entrance of the cave with firewood and set it alight to drive them out. The giants who came out were killed with a barrage of arrows. Those who stayed in the cave suffocated from lack of oxygen from the fire.